Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Funny with Caitlin. It is such an amazing class. She is such an amazing woman. I want to say before we get going, I like to do a little introduction for her because she means so much to me. I am so blessed to call her friend and a collaborator, but she truly is like the best at what she does. She's just amazing. So if you are here and you're wanting to better your skills set in dialect, she is book her privately if you ever need someone to do something for you for an audition, for a callback, if you need her to help read sites for you so you can really book that job. She books privates, and this is a perfect format for this kind of thing. You don't even need to be in person. You could be anywhere all over the world and work with her. So it is well worth it. She will get you where you need to get. Please welcome I'm going to get out of her way because she does what she does best without me. So please welcome the incredible Caitlin Muelder. Woo!
And hi everybody in your individual homes. I put a limited amount of the screens, otherwise I get overwhelmed by faces. So hello to all of you, even if I'm not individually seeing you. I can hear you, and psychically, I know you're there. Yeah, so today, what we're gonna do is just dive into New York. And I hope that, because I know there's all this craziness going on in the world, so I hope today can provide a little place to focus your brain. I don't want to exactly say escape because there's things we probably should escape from right now, some hard truths to look at, but a place to have your brain go, regroup for a little bit, do some art, work an artistic skill, and then kind of go back and face the rest of the day. So wherever you are, be there, and we'll just jump into New York together this way. Okay. So the thing with the New York accents is that, as with any accent, we're going to focus on a very general description of a very highly nuanced family of accents that have a lot of sub-accents within it, okay? So for our purposes today, we'll be dealing with general New York City and focusing on sounds that are constant throughout the different boroughs, because there are some of the same sounds in upstate New York, but that's really kind of a separate accent. So Hudson Valley and Buffalo, those accents actually have a lot more in common with Michigan, with Detroit, with Chicago even. So New York City and the boroughs, it's kind of its own thing. And as with any accent, you have the sort of general and then subgroups that go out from it. New York has, in the United States, for one regional area, probably the most. So the great thing is that there are thousands of resources, of authentic resources you can find online and in film and television. And also YouTube. I'm a big one for local city council meetings, and I'll talk about that later. But I just want to kind of go through what some of those subgroups are to give you a sense of just how broad this family of accents can be. So you have New York, that's Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn. So there's 5 already. Then within those 5, there are subgroups there. New York has a wonderful history of being very proud of its accent, with a brief period in the 80s where there was sort of a division in Manhattan where people wanted to back off of it a little bit. We'll get to that later when we talk about Manhattan. But for the most part, it's very proud of its melting pot history. And it is a melting pot, but for my brain, when I think about New York dialects, I actually picture it more like a patchwork quilt, so that you have specific regions and then overlapping thread that connects the regions, if that makes sense. Because rather than melting into an amalgamation, which is what the sort of general accent does, the individual pockets, there's a strong tradition of maintaining their own regional or ethnic accent. So let's even just take Nuyorican. So Nuyorican is Puerto Rican and New York. And then there are subgroups within that. There's the Dominican New York, which is different from Puerto Rican. There's Jamaican New York, obviously its own. There is Italian Bronx. There is Irish Bronx. There is Italian Brooklyn. There's Irish Brooklyn. So there are these many, many, many subgroups within these accents. Because we don't have time to go into all of that today, we'll be keeping things general, but I just want to remind people of that. When you get cast in something, or if you have an audition specifically for a New York character, try to look in the script and see if it mentions specifically where the character is from, whether they grew up in a place and now live somewhere else, if they grew up in the Bronx, but they want to sound like a Wall Street trader, that might affect the accent. And you could play with two different regions that way. There's a lot of things that can go into that. Also, on that same line of thinking, characters are people for the most part, unless you're playing an alien or a robot, or maybe a houseplant if it's a cartoon or whatever. People have specific ways of speaking. Some people naturally have a more nasal voice. So that may not mean, because there's a strong tendency towards nasal with the Queen's accent, but you could be a person from Brooklyn who just happens to have a nasal voice. Okay, so again, today I'll be speaking in generalities, but we have to allow some room for individual people who happen to be characters and their influences. Okay, so New York. So Manhattan is often the softest New York. So you could have a person from Manhattan who has what to anyone west of the Mississippi would think of as a traditional New York accent, or you could have someone who you think you barely even hear an accent at all. Manhattan is clipped, it's fast, it's efficient, it's getting to the point, it's in a little bit of a hurry most of the time. And it's, I think of it as an accent that is sort of like the rabbit in Alice in Wonderland. It's sort of preoccupied with time, and it's in a hurry, and it's slightly agitated, and it just wants to get to going, just wants to get to it. What's the next task directly in front of it? The Bronx, again, big generality, but Chaz Palminteri, smoky, heavier, maybe the furthest back in terms of placement, which we'll talk about in a second, the heaviest of all of them. Front-footed on initial consonants, making the point. Did you hear it? So that it's a front-footed sound. Brooklyn's a little more sing-songy, okay? So the vowels are gonna be elongated. Again, I'm being super general here. But you're gonna have more highs and lows and pitch variations and things. And then Queens is the most nasal for the most part. Staten Island, put it all together. Staten Island sometimes has even New Yorkers, friends of mine who, and I lived in New York for 7.5 years, but I don't consider myself a New Yorker. So when I say New Yorker, I'm referring to friends who were born and raised in any of the 5 boroughs and have lived there all of, or most of their lives. Often refer to Staten Island as being like the cartoon of the New York accents, because it's an amalgamation of all of the different boroughs. It's got a little bit of everything, and it is intense. So those are the generalities you can think of if you're listening for characters and trying to guess what part of New York they're from. So that's part one. For you, the actor, some things to consider, because there's so much reference material. I'm going to talk about this first, and then we'll go into some individual sound changes in general New York. But I want to give you some reference directions first. What's great about the New York accents is that there is an unbelievable amount of material you can find for yourself. if you simply magic fingers type in on your Google New York City actors, you will get a list. You can go onto Wikipedia and it will put gajillions of actors and where they're from. And that can be interesting because you may have someone like the brilliant Robert De Niro, who was born in Manhattan, but has played characters from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island, and he's played every borough. And his speaking regular Robert De Niro voice is a very beautiful example of kind of a middle class, working class, white, Manhattan, general American New York. So he's a very good standard New York accent actor to reference. You could look, just television, Orange is the New Black comes to mind. It's an amazing reference because it has so many examples of subgroups. So you'll get a kind of general New York, and then you'll get New Yorican. You'll get the difference between the New Yorican accent and the Dominican New York accent. Basically everything Martin Scorsese has ever done. I mean, almost every single one of his projects is in or around the New York and the tri-state area. You could watch reruns of The Nanny if you want to get some of that Queens sound. If you can go onto YouTube or look up CNN. So many amazing politicians are from New York. You can listen to Governor Cuomo. You could listen, if you want a really traditional Brooklyn, you could listen to Bernie Sanders. We'll talk about his lip placement in a little bit. I mean, he literally sticks his jaw out in the exact placement you need the sound for Brooklyn. There are so many sources. You could look up AFI's top 100 films in New York. There's going to be so many examples you can pull from. There's a online search directory called Brooklyn Translate. If you want to get specific phrases that you might hear in New York that are not the same in the rest of the country, there's tons of sources. That can also be overwhelming. So when you get your slides for an audition, or you get cast in something and you get your character breakdown and you get the script, I would encourage you to look for any specifics the script or the breakdown gives you so that you can focus really on just that specific area of New York to make it as accurate as possible, but also to help make it a little less overwhelming, because there's so much you can pull from. Okay. Any other things I want to say about that? I'll add this. Like any accent, what you're really listening for is sounds that became isolated that then sort of reformed, a little bit like a transformer. You think you're getting a car, but then it actually turns out to be a robot. The accent gets isolated, it becomes its own thing. The further that gets isolated, the stronger the sounds stay. So as an example of the entire country in the United States, you have all of these immigrant groups coming to a relatively small area of land. And one of the best things about the New York accents is that you can really hear the imprint of the immigrants in the sounds even still today. You can hear the influence of the early Dutch settlers, the British, the Irish, the Portuguese, the Italian, lots of Eastern European. It's one of the strongest influences in the United States of the Yiddish accent. There's Russian, there is tons from the Caribbean and the islands in between Florida and Jamaica. It is the African-American experience within the New York accent also expands into all these other directions because you have urban African-American dialect plus Puerto Rican African plus Dominican African into New York. People's marks, the bravery of people moving or surviving being brought to the United States, their accents are imprinted in the general New York accent and lasts to this day. So it's one of my favorite things. When I first moved there, I would listen, you know, on the subway, and because I love accents and it was something I was interested in doing, sometimes I would this is back in the day when you could still have a little tape recorder, those little cassettes. Whew, aging myself. But I would just tape background noise in the subways, and then I would listen to it when I'd go home, and I would try to repeat just the various bits and pieces that I overheard. It felt creepy to actually tape someone's conversation. That felt a little bit stalkery and maybe like not against an amendment. But a general noise, I felt like it was okay to audio tape. And I had this sort of image that I was hearing the ghosts of all of these people that first came to the United States left over in the accent. So of all of the accents within the United States, there's something specific to New York where you are hearing the immigrant's experience in the accent. Okay, why did I get into all of that in my ghost daydreams? Because accents also have a point of view. And again, each character is different, each person is different, each circumstance the character might find him or herself in or their self in is different. But there is an energy, or I would call it a point of view, to an accent. And sometimes those stereotypes of the point of view can be helpful, sometimes they can be limiting, but they are what they are, and at least it's a starting point. And one of the things that's really interesting about the New York point of view for the general New York accent is it's a mixture of two things that you wouldn't necessarily put together. Absolute casual relaxation and ready to pounce. Have you ever seen a cat when it looks both totally relaxed but at any second it could just leap and like attack your face or a bit of foil? That's sort of what's going on with the New York accent. So that there's going to be an absolute relaxation in the front of the mouth, but the tongue is going to be engaged at any minute to launch into something. And so it's an interesting mixture of casual relaxation and tension. Not tension in the uptight, rigid sense, but tension in the sense of ready to engage. There is a playful mixture and a bit of suspicion. There's, even if the face is direct, it can feel like you're talking a little bit out of the side of one of your mouth. There's a watchfulness, a wariness, and a wanting to play. And those two energies going back and forth are really interesting, both as an actor and in terms of your character, but for my purposes, I'm interested in you using them when you're applying it to your accent. Okay, I'm covering a lot of bases today, I know. What can we say? We're in a pandemic. Our brains can get unfocused. Bear with me. So now what I'm going to talk about is rhythm. How rhythm is placed into the forwardness. And I've even just switched into a very light general New York that I'm going to just be using for the rest of our conversations here today. Okay. And I hope you can maybe see it in the camera. I blocked myself off because it makes me too self-conscious to watch myself talk to you guys. So I hope you can see it. But what there should be is a lot of energy, a lot of resonance right here between the lower part of your nose, your nasal labial folds is what it's called. Oh, sounds so gross. And right down to the sides of your mouth, okay? So that when you go into certain regions like Brooklyn, it can really even move into your chin, into your lower lip. This is where I was referring to Bernie Sanders. Watch him speak from a profile. His lip literally will almost come out that far. The energy is very far forward. But for general New York, it just needs to be right about here. When you start moving into Queens, it's gonna get a little brighter, a little bit more into your nasal, into your nose, and your nasal cavities. But for general New York, right here is fine, okay? Now, the actual tongue movement is gonna be busiest in the middle of your mouth, okay? Unless you're moving into the Bronx, and then it's gonna be the back of your throat a little bit more. But for general New York, the middle of your tongue is gonna do a lot of the work, and the resonance is gonna be right here along the front sides of your mouth, okay, where you get your laugh lines, unless you've had them removed or you haven't earned them yet, you youths. So think about putting it right there. When you go to a concert and the band is right there, but then they have huge speakers right by the stage that are just blasting you, that's what this is for. It's for blasting you with sound, because the New York accent is not necessarily a quiet accent. It doesn't have to be shouted, but it's unapologetic. And that's another thing with a tone of voice, that a point of view rather, that I want you to think about. It's not necessarily always confrontational. It can be casual. It can even be indirect, you know, but it's unapologetic. It is what it is. And it's an accent that is looking, like all of these ghosts of the various immigrants before us, to make its mark, to be heard, to be seen and to be heard. And I want you to think about that as we count from 1 to 10, okay? So now I'm gonna go back, I'm just gonna talk like Caitlin, and I'm gonna say with my sort of general American, heavily influenced by the Midwest accent, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So everybody at home, just count in your regular voices, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now, without even thinking about it, the individual sounds that we're going to change to, I want you to move the energy forward right into this area of your face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, right in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. So now you've moved a little bit more into that area of your face. This is where we're going to be playing, okay? And the next thing I want to talk is pitch variation. So it's not often when people are coming to the United States and they're working on the general American, they will over compensate and end up sounding flat like a robot. And that's not true for any of the American accents, really. But in comparison to general American, if this is sort of general American tap, New York's going to allow for places where there's a little bit more high and a little bit more low, not unlike British, not unlike Irish, where we're going to have some of those highs and lows to help us get a point of view across, and innuendo and inferring lots of information will just be conveyed with pitch variation. Do you want to go there? No, I don't. Do you want to go there? Going to that down. There's a lot you can do with it. It can also be an accent where you use rhythm specifically to get certain points across. It can be like some drumming. So no, I don't want to do that. Why did you think I was going to do that? What are you talking about? Give me that quickly. Where if I go back into my general American, I'm always kind of going back and forth between rhythm and melody. And in New York, I can just sometimes trust the rhythm alone. That's the point. That's all I have to do is just use that, if that makes sense. So you're going to be able to use musicality in your speech with your New York accent in a much more dynamic way and intentionally than you might with, I'm hearing some papers, so I don't know if that's me.
Ouch. Papers.
Oh, someone just sneezed. Bless you. Okay, I think, can you guys still hear me? Just give me some nods. Okay, great, okay. So now, some other things. Let's start going through, because I've been chatting a lot. Let's start going through some individual sound changes. And I don't know if you ever saw the meme of that guy who's just like sprinkling salt, sprinkling sugar, but that's what I'm gonna be doing today with New York, is I'm just gonna give you some sprinkles, because all of these sounds could be broken down into lots of complicated areas, and we don't have time for that today, and it can be a lot of information can be overwhelming. So I'm just gonna give you a little sprinkle. Some of the major sounds. Here we go. Okay. So with New York, one of the first things that comes up is similarities and differences between it and Boston. Okay. And one of those is the short O and the ah sounds. So there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, unfortunately. In general, Boston will always take the O, the short O, which I'll give you an example of in a second, and keep it ah. In a general New York, it can be ah, though it won't be as bright, or it can become all. So you might hear, do you want, that's not N-O-T, what I was talking about, or you might hear, that's not what I'm talking about. So you can hear not and not. You can hear chocolate, you can hear chocolate. You could hear, yeah, I went to the office the other day, or I went to the office the other day. but you won't tend to have, in Boston, that the air tends to go back on that sound. So you get Boston rather than Boston or Boston. So let me give you some examples of short O's. So for words like, that are spelled with A, like father, spa, want, that stays with a little rounding, right? Father, father. Father, father. Want, want. Want, want. You could think of it as almost having an H after it, okay? Spa, spa. Spa, spa. And if you can see this, it's very subtle, but there's just a little rounding that's happening on my lip when I'm doing the New York ah, okay? So father, father. There's a TH, maybe this will be easier. Spa, spa. Spa, spa. A-H, okay? O words like hot pocket, or hot pocket. As a Midwestern person, this is a big difference. Words like horrible, orange become horrible and orange. Forest becoming forest. So a horrible forest of oranges can become a horrible forest of oranges. It just tickles me whenever I think of that. Just a scary orange forest. My favorite, if you've heard any of these other lessons, if you've ever worked with me, you know that I like the phrase hot pocket becoming hot pocket. Tick tock, tick tock. Stop, stop. Chocolate, chocolate. So the short O often rounds and can become more like AW or ALL sounds. Now, AU and AW words are generally going to move even more forward. So again, and this is a change that comes all the way back from Great Britain. So in an RP, standard RP accent, you can have ah, all, and you see how far forward my lips go, right? I'll do it with my good light here, maybe that'll help. So ah, all. Again, ah, all. So you can get father, hot pocket, pull. On pull, I'm practically pushing my finger off. And we're gonna have that nice rounded sound. Our lips are gonna go forward again on things like walk, talk, pull, laundry, law, cat's got paws. Was that written in the clause? Clause and clause, right? So we're gonna have a really rounded, as opposed to how I might say, Paul is studying law, Paul is studying law. Paul is studying law, which is almost sounds like AH, is now gonna go into that more rounded sound, Paul is studying law. One of the great things about accents, whether it's that have this forward rounding, whether it's New York or British, is they happen to, coincidentally, be wonderful accents to sing in. Because you really have this, you know, on trumpets when they have that extra amplifying piece they put on the end of it and it can really push some sound out, that's what's happening here. So it makes, it's gonna elongate a lot of vowels. And in singing, that's largely what you're being asked to do. So that it's pushing sound out in a longer stretched manner. So New York is a great accent to sing in. Side note, I try to give people things to play with if I'm working with them on a musical. And in addition to the musical songs they might have for that show, like so for New York, maybe it's 42nd Street. But I would also say, start singing some Frank Sinatra ballads. Start finding some old crooners and try to apply the New York accent or listen to the New York accent when those guys are singing it. It's also great fun. And if you have fun in the accent, you'll commit further, you'll have more freedom as a performer, and it's a self-fulfilling good thing. We're gonna move on to some more sounds here. Let me just check time. Yeah, we're good. So that's one of the first major changes, is the ah sound, the short O sound, and the long O sound. The next one is the next two I would say are the nasal A and the glided oi. These two sounds have rules for when they change. So I'm just going to cover them briefly because the rules can be a little overwhelming. But in general, the A sound can become A-yen when you have the following consonants involved. So D, F, G, the J or J sound, M, N, S, and sh plus th, not th, and z. Okay, so again, if you're writing these down, D, F, G, J, M, N, S, sh or sh, the th, that's th, not th, and z. Okay, so this is when a becomes more like or a. So you can have grab become grab, right? Grab, grab. So that's a tab, tab, cabbage, cabbage. The a is always going to be tighter in New York, but on some of these sounds, it's going to have a full change. So let's look at a D. So mad might become mad. I'm so mad at her. Mad. Or it's almost like a cat going, nya, nya. Or you can hear it in some Spanish accents, that inya sound. Mad, bad, sad, saddle, paddle. So the F sound, after, calf, half, laugh, daffodil, raffle. The G sound, bag, hag, lag, sag. You paid your SAG union dues. Rag, haggle, straggle, right? So a lot of the, it's gonna get tightened, A, and that will happen for the consonant sounds I mentioned above, okay? Conversely, I'm gonna give you some consonants now where it doesn't, the A doesn't happen, but the A can still be reduced just to E. So, jack. It doesn't have to be jack, it can just be jack, as opposed to jack. Al, it doesn't need to be ale, right? That would be more like you're having some ale. So it's not ale Pacino, it's just Al, Al Pacino. Happy, it's not happy birthday, it's just happy, happy birthday. Cat, it's not cat, it's just cat. Is that your cat? It's a black cat. It's cute. It's just the tightening of the E. A similar change, we're gonna go to a new vowel here, is, again, I'm just doing some sprinkles today, is the I sound. So I becoming more like oi, right? And this actually only happens with a few trigger sounds that cause it, but it is a distinctly New York sound. So here's when it changes. So you can get that I becoming I when it happens prior to a voiceless consonant. So that would be S, F, T, P, K, and the th, okay? So you wouldn't have it on something like lightning, it'd just be lightning, but you would have it on Eloisa. You would have it on the word, let me give you an SFTPK, slice. Can I have a slice of pizza, as opposed to a slice, right? Slice of pizza. This is a sound you will hear in almost all the boroughs, but you will hear it incredibly exaggerated in Brooklyn, in Staten Island, in certain regions within the Bronx, it's quite dominant. But for me, living in New York, this is the sound I associate with Brooklyn. And it doesn't need to go all the way to oi. It can, but that tends to be more specific to a Yiddish influence. So for a while, I lived with my husband. He was my boyfriend at that point. And we lived close to the area right before a Hasidic Jewish community. And there would be a deli where I'd go to, and as soon as I went into that deli, it would almost become slois. Not just slice, but slois. It got very strong. So if you're doing something, if you're doing a New York accent and it almost sounds cartoonish, this might be one of the sounds you're overdoing. So it doesn't need to be extreme. It's just, it just is a change. It just doesn't need to be, you don't need to go to 11 with it. Or anyone who's watching Letterkenny, you don't need to go to there. Some references. Okay. I'm gonna move on to a new consonant sound. Again, I'm skipping a bunch. There's several in New York, but for the sake of our time, I want to give you a couple vowels, a couple consonants. So the dropped sound. So in phonetics, this sound looks like an N that has a little kind of elephant's trunk tail, or trunk rather, not tail, at the front of it. It's like an N that has a little curly Q. And this is the sound. So not just ing isn't ga, it's just I'm going, I'm thinking, right? You also hear it in sounds where you don't have an ng, but you have it in a word like thank or bank. Otherwise it would be thank or bannock. So we do have an sound. The sound is a predominant sound in a lot of Indonesian and Vietnamese, Cantonese accents, so Southeastern Asia. But it's in many other, it's in English as well. And in New York, can get shortened just to N and occasionally doubled down on. So you might hear, I was thinking I was going and we were running, we were playing. Or for emphatic emphasis, you might hear occasionally, I was going to tell her. So if this is a change that it's about context where you're using it. If the speaker's going quickly and it is, the consonant isn't helping to drive a point, but it's part of a larger thought, probably 99% of the time you're just gonna drop the G. I was running, I was thinking it was, we were jumping, she was lying, dropping the G, dropping the G. If it's for emphasis, to prove a point or clarification or to win specifically an argument, the G will be doubled down on. I was going to tell her. I was thinking it. So that is just a little bit of context for when you're doing that change. The other major, two major consonants for you to think about with New York, the changes are the dropped R, letter, father at the end of a word preceded by a vowel, daughter, mother, brother, sister, Tucker Carlson was on the news the other night. Whatever it is, you're dropping the R. And the switching from a hard T to a D in medial placement. So it isn't just what's the matter with her, it's what's the matter. What's the matter with her? Did you read the letter? And it can even happen sometimes at the beginning of the substitution from a T into a T or to a D can sometimes happen also at the beginning of things. So instead of the Bronx, it's de Bronx, duh. So the major consonants I want you to think about for New York are T's becoming D's, sometimes TH's becoming D's, dropping the R's at the end of words when they're preceded by a vowel. The major vowels I want you to think about are the I having a tendency to move into oi, the a being shortened into I, and the changes going from either a to o, as in hot or hot, and the AU and AW and ALL words moving forward, like talk, laundry, awesome. So, oh my God, I actually timed this one fairly decently to get to questions, self high five. So we've got about, I think 10 or 15 minutes for questions or whatever. It was my goal today to actually sum some things up in a point where I could have questions. So I did it. So Gigi,
You did, and you did a great job. Yeah, we definitely have some time for questions. Anybody want to raise their hand? Okay, Linda, I'm going to unmute you, or ask to unmute you. Linda, you're not showing your video, but you have your virtual hand up.
For singers to employ specifically, the sound that that's a great question. So
that is a good question.
I'm going to think about general, if it is British, it is dropping the R's connected to vowels will actually help you. So instead of something like, if you have to sing around the world, because you're gonna back off the R, we will understand world in the context of the sentence you're singing, or the phrase, or the lyrics. So trust that you can just do a hint of R and keep it all vowel, because then you'll be able to carry the note as long as you want to. The other thing I would say is that the crisper the T's, initial and final consonants in words are the key to clarity in singing. It doesn't matter if it's something like, if I take Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, which is British, but then maybe I take something like Tracy, who was amazing with her German in the Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein, that because she was so crisp with her consonants, it made everything incredibly clear when she was singing. So that I'm trying to think of a lyric, especially if you have to do lots of words into a short phrase. God, I'm trying to think of, this is not a song in a musical, but I'm just gonna make it up. I want to go to Taco Bell to get some food. So if I needed to sing, I want to go to Taco Bell to get some food, I'm gonna wanna hit those T's and use them as launching pads, the T's and the K's, that I want to go. I want to go to Taco Bell to get some food. That consonants are there for clarity and rhythm, and vowels are there for emotion. So if you can take out of R, you're going to get, in a word like world, you're going to get more emotion out of that word, if it's a British accent or a Southern accent or sometimes a New York accent. And in phrases where you can, if the phrase has to go very quickly, where, especially in a lot of comical songs, you'll have expository information that happens in a song in a comedic way. The more you're hitting your consonants, the more the audience is going to follow it. And if the audience follows it, they're investing further. In the United States, there's been a backlash against, I hope it changes, but against being too intellectual and sounding that intellectual voices and voices of clarity are bad, but the opposite is true for performance. If the audience can't understand you, they can't invest in you. That would be.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what's great? I gotta say this, is there's room for the smarts, and then there's a lot of room for some really goofy, dumb stuff.
Yay!
You gotta mellow it out with lots. I enjoy lots of goofy.
Well, before we go, is there anything else that we could cover? I'm looking around. I don't see anybody with their hands up. Oh, hi, Dana. Dana's got a break from playing outside, see? You look gorgeous. Well, listen, everybody, I want to thank you. Thank you, Caitlin, so much for sharing your knowledge with us today. It's always just been a delight, and you're so kind to share your gifts with us. I hope everybody got a lot out of it, took a lot of notes. Yes, Julie Lamoureux, I know you did. I saw you like this the whole time. Smart lady. and before we go to hiatus. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Gigi.
Bye, Caitlin. Thank you.